The Democratic Party will go through their own trials during this period. In the late 1800s, uh, the populists will split away. These are the farmers who demand the coinage of silver and gold. And the Democrats will adopt them into their party. That will become part of their party. Also, and the populists will bring with them, by the way, a desire to ban alcohol, which will ultimately result in a constitutional amendment. And this will begin the process of the kind of fight over the soul of the Democratic Party, as the Democratic Party is really becoming two distinct things in this period. Pro-slavery Southerners who tend to be opposed to things like the teaching of creationism in school, as we see in the Scopes Monkey trial, and favor banning alcohol. And then the other part of it is northern urban Democrats who tend to be immigrants, who tend to be industrial workers, who tend to be okay with things like the teaching of evolution and tend to favor alcohol being legal. And actually, they're going to go through a series of brutal nominating processes in 1920, 1924, and 1928, where these two groups of the party will fight it out, eventually nominating a Catholic, Al Smith, and leading to what's going to be the long alienation of the Southern Democrat. By 1932, though, the North, and truly Northeastern, urban Democrat has won control of the party, and FDR is going to represent that. FDR will create a coalition. This is, of course, in response to the Great Depression, which will discredit the Republicans in the eyes of most voters. And then, of course, Republicans will adopt isolationism in the 30s, which will turn into a disaster with World War II. And we'll see a period of extreme liberal or progressive dominance, with Democrats winning most of those elections. You're also going to see minorities, even African Americans, who of course have been freed by the Republicans, are going to shift over to the Democratic Party. Particularly when things like FDR makes the New Deal programs colorblind. Harry Truman will desegregate the armed forces and the federal government. And then, of course, eventually you'll see JFK embrace Martin Luther King. And these are all Democrats, of course. And LBJ pushed through the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. Now, and we'll get back to that. The next great change is going to really begin in 1964. And by 1964, the Republicans see an opening. They see an opportunity to pick up some Democratic voters. And in 1964, with the nomination of a very conservative Republican named Barry Goldwater, a senator from Arizona, the Republicans will attempt to begin to woo that former Southern racist voter who's upset about the civil rights movement. It's actually fairly easy to watch the Southern white voter who opposes the civil rights movement become more and more uncomfortable in the Democratic Party. In 1948, for example, South Carolina Senator Strom Thurmond runs for president on one issue. He wants a constitutional amendment guaranteeing segregation. And then, of course, in the 1960s, in 64, and then again in 68, George Wallace runs as an independent, again on this idea of rejecting the civil rights movement. By 1980, though, these voters have shifted over for good, at least up until now, into the Republican Party, as Goldwater in 64, and then Nixon in 68 and 72, and then Reagan in 1980 will all begin to use code words to appeal to basically the Southern white racist. Things like states' rights and law and order, coming out against rights of the accused, which of course in the minds of many white Southern racists means minority voters. And that will create the coalitions that we have today. Reagan will add to this coalition finally in 1980 by courting the religious vote. The religious vote previously, if anything, had been Democratic. I mean, remember Martin Luther King, of course, is a reverend. But in 1980, Ronald Reagan, who had never been particularly religious himself, will come out and strongly opposed to abortion, which had been legalized by the Supreme Court in 1973 in Roe v. Wade, and really cater to that religious element. And we will create the party alignments that we have today. Now, there has been suggestion that 2008 was a critical election, and was the next turning in this great cycle. I think it's a little too early to tell. I think we need some more data. Here in 2012, we'll probably begin to get a better idea if that's true. So I don't want to talk about it yet because these things take time to figure out if that's what's happened or not. But it is possible that we have now seen another critical election and we've entered into a